is Monday, August 7th, 2023. This is the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting for the School District of Waukesha. Can we verify that the meeting has been properly posted?
Yes, it was.
Thank you. We are now at the point of the meeting for public comment. We do not have any public speakers tonight.
We have none.
Great, thank you. And moving on to our first action item is the approval of minutes from June 12th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
So moved. To approve.
Second?
All in favor? Say aye.
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 All opposed? Passes 4-0. And the next action item for this evening is the approval of vouchers. Did we have any questions?
We did. We had 3 this month. The first was, what does Huddle stand for? Huddle is the name of an organization whose mission is to change the way that teams around the world capture, organize, analyze, and learn from film and data. So, for instance, a camera will record the field of play and then within hours organizes and distributes the stats and analytics by player. So Huddle is just their acronym. It was mentioned about $9,400 for North. That is an annual fee.
Mr. Wad?
Do the other high schools also subscribe and just, are they on a different cadence for renewal? Is that-
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. The second question I had was, what does IXL stand for? It is an acronym for IXL. It's a personalized learning with comprehensive K-12 curriculum, individualized guidance, and real-time analytics. And the $59,484 is a district-wide expense.
Thanks.
Dr. Piasek?
I'll just add a clarification to that, and I think we might have lapped the turnover on the board, but the Teaching and Learning Committee approved and then pushed to the full board a few months ago the full subscription to IXL for our middle schools. So that was the pilot that we were working with that went through the whole T&L committee approval process.
Thank you. And there was one last question regarding We Energies. On this report, we saw multiple entries, similar dollars, similar dates, and that had to do with the crossover of 2 We Energy bills due to the training that's going on in our department.
So just to clarify, those were 2 different time periods, but the invoices or bills came at the same?
That is accurate.
Okay, thank you.
That's all.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? Okay, I'd be looking for a motion.
So moved.
I second it.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Passes 4-0. The next item is the approval of the 2023-2024 preliminary budget. Mr. Clark?
Yeah, I'll screen share here quick. Couple people, different files we'll look at here, but I thought I'd start out with just a quick summary, 5 slides, really high level, just to kind of refresh where all the decisions, because the document before you is really a financial measure of all the decisions you've made over about the last 6 months regarding 2023-24 fiscal year. So included in this budget is the employee compensation and benefits plans that the board had signed off on. That included employee stipends that we've done in the past, or at least the last 2 years now. It also includes the facility improvements and safety projects that the board approved earlier in 2023. And the continuation of school site-based carryover program, that's something that the money that schools don't spend rolls into our fund balance, and then we roll it back out with a deficit budget to bring it back out of fund balance as schools choose to utilize it or not. It also includes the final phases of the approved ESSER projects and the learning materials that were all funded by that. There's still cleanup. So ESSER 2, by the end of this fiscal year, will be completely expended. ESSER 3, we have until that the September of '24. And once the big HVAC projects, which we're going to go into detail on, once those close out with the learning materials, we should be fully expended. But for those people who are tracking us, or we've already fully committed the dollars. Now it's just waiting for the work to be completed and the invoices to be received. Also included in this budget is the operational savings from the sale of Lindholm Administration Building and Randall Elementary. Some other things that are important to note, the budget also includes the addition of 8 FTE and special education teaching staff. The continuation of the defeasance of our Fund 39 long-term debt, which will allow us to pay off the 2018 referendum in 6 years if we continue at this pace. Authorizes the use of $950,000 of district reserves to hold health premiums flat and reduce dental premiums. That's if the claims come in. We're self-funded, so if the claims don't come in, those dollars aren't touched. So that was part of the goal of holding health premiums flat for this year. The budget also includes the elimination of 1 FTE central office administrative position. And lastly, the budget is in full compliance with state-imposed revenue limit legislation. As I mentioned before, the defeasance of Fund 39 debt, if we continue with what's presented and we adopt that in October, next October would be the last time we would have to levy for those debt. At that point, we have enough cash on hand to pay off the remaining payments related to the referendum. The next steps are budget development's a strange process. We wait until the 5th month of the fiscal year to finalize everything. But these are the key steps. What's adopted tonight, if it's approved, this tentative or preliminary budget and tax levy would be presented at the budget hearing, which is September 13th, right before the board meeting. The next big financial, and I always say it's the most important financial day of the year for school districts, the third Friday count actually falls very early. It's on September 15th this year. That tells us how much funding and taxing authority that the board would hold. And then the week of October 9th, we will hear or present a near final budget. The expenditure line items really don't change. Really what's being altered at that point is we'll know the amount of revenue limit authority we have. We'll have our state aid certification come in on the 15th, so we can finalize all the levy and everything else. But generally, this document's going to be very close to what's asked to be approved in October. So as I mentioned, on the 15th, we'll get our equalization aid certification. On October 1st, we'll get our property value percentage increase from the state. And then on the October 23rd, we've tentatively scheduled board approval of the final budget and tax levy. And then by November 1st, actually we have a few more days, but I always put it as November 1st, we need to certify the tax levy with all the municipalities that we serve. So that's some highlights of what's in the budget. As I said, we make a lot of decisions and often many months in advance, so I thought I'd at least touch on the larger issues. The next thing I thought we'd go over is, and this is in board docs. As I mentioned, we don't know our equalization aid. We don't know our final revenue limit number either. So what I've done in the past is kind of given the board at this point 3 scenarios of tax, our best guess on the data we have of different options we can use to include in the preliminary budget, which the final document we'll put together after tonight. But if you look at the middle of the page, it's the total revenue limit line under scenario A, B, and C is all the same number. The dollars are the same. It's really what's coming in the form of taxes and what's coming in the form of aid. So it's a net zero game. It's just a matter of what we think is fair to present to the community on September 13th of what the levy would be. So every July 1st, DPI is required to present us an aid estimate. I oftentimes don't use that number because our aid's based off of the prior year's actual expenditures, and they're using budgeted dollars. Now, often we're close with the budget and actual, but sometimes we're not. So we oftentimes have better data than what DPI is looking at. But I think this year, with so many variables involved, with district spending ESSER money and all these things, it's hard to decipher. So I think, if you were to ask, I think scenario A, I like to come in conservative in September and have a little better tax scenario in October, so we're gliding into a easier conversation. But it's hard to tell. The state just passed a biennial budget with a 2.6% increase in the pool of money that'll be paid out in aid. But then you have 425 or 6 school districts in the state that have different pupil counts. They might be spending their money differently. Their valuations might be different. So you have all these variables that go into the formula for aid that make it, it's not as easy as just saying, well, everyone should get about 2.6. On average, we will, but that's an average. So if we go with the DPI's July 1st aid estimate, we continue our defeasance, we would be looking at a tax levy increase of 5.76%. And as I say that, I think it's important to remember that last year our levy went down by 10.2%, so it's not the smooth line I prefer to see. But if we increase the aid estimate to 2.6 or 4, you can see that the levy does come down under those two scenarios. But again, I prefer to be a little more cautious now and hopefully have better news come October. Other than that, we put in a 5% growth in property valuation. I think that's pretty conservative. But when I look at this sheet, I'm more focused on levy, quite honestly, than I am rate. But rate's a common measure as well. But we still, rate-wise, are close to where we were. We were 597 last year. Under scenario A, we're at $6.01. A small, less than 1% increase. And my guess is the property valuation is going to come in higher than 5%. So, so that's a number that, you know, we could have an increase in the levy and very likely still have a decrease in our tax rate compared to last year when it's all said and done based on the reassessment numbers I'm hearing and things like that. So again, overall, a very low rate and, you know, a levy increase, but again, we had the biggest I've ever seen since 2/3 funding came in last year of 10%. So that's the, any questions on or thoughts on which scenario we'd like to use? Again, they're all financially the same. It's just a matter of how you'd like it presented at the budget hearing.
I was going to ask when the budget hearing is before this meeting, since we have the other meeting before the school board meeting on the 13th.
Yeah, we usually have it at like 6:30 or something before the board meeting. It generally doesn't take more than, I think 10 minutes is long.
Correct.
It's usually 5 probably.
And then we just move HR up to like 6.
Yep, yeah, we just stagger them. I think one year we might even agendized it for 6:45.
Dr. Piasek?
Thank you. I appreciate all the detail that you put into this, Darren, you and your team. There obviously are some moving pieces this year. The per pupil, which we hadn't seen year over year. And the rate, just even getting to a rate, I think is complex, although it doesn't ultimately, it doesn't effectively make significant changes to the individual property owner because their rate is changing based on
In theory, they're all moving together.
everybody's, yeah, that's a good way to put it. So, I mean, I prefer to go with your scenario A because we don't have our arms around the aid calculation, and I think we come out ahead. I think you're right that the EAV estimate is probably low, just based on what I've heard from friends, neighbors, and families with respect to property valuations that have been communicated. So I just think there's so many big things that it's really hard for us to pick one other than the scenario A that's more conservative until we know more. But
And all that information come October, it's like every other day you're getting a new sliver of it. And again, for people, we serve other than the city of Waukesha as well. We have, not everyone was reassessed, but they are certainly the biggest chunk of the pie.
yeah, some of us got hit last year.
And that's one other comment for whoever's watching. We don't get more revenue because the property valuation of your home went up. It doesn't work that way for us. We are funded on a per pupil basis, not a percentage or a dollar amount per $1,000 of value.
Any other questions? I would agree with Mr. Clark and Dr. Piasek that being conservative, reminder that we have been running at a structural deficit for several years, and conservative in this case is best for us.
And we get to come back in October and finalize it, so
Right.
it gives us a lot of latitude.
Okay, so if there's no other questions, we would be looking for a motion.
I'll move to approve the preliminary budget proposal.
Thank you, Dr. Piasek.
I second it.
Mrs. Voigt, seconded by Mrs. Voigt. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? Passes 4-0.
Okay.
We are now moving into the discussion and information items. The first topic for this evening is an update on the HVAC. This has been a topic that we have been discussing and presenting for about the last 8 months on a lot of significant work. I don't know, Mr. Clark, if you want to bridge the gap on where we started, where we've been.
Well, that's a perfect segue to the first slide. So, let me bring up a slideshow. I shouldn't have done Google.
Nice to have you guys back.
No problem. How do I get to the slideshow? Get rid of all the background. Oh, thank you.
A few people that I haven't presented in front of before, newer to the board. So I'm Kurt Wieblaus. I have been working with the district since 2017 as your owner's rep. So as the referendum project finished up and this HVAC project was asked to help with these projects. So I've been working with the district for quite a few years.
So, yeah, this all goes back, actually, the HVAC conversation started with the referendum work, and we'll touch on really what we've done since 2018 forward in a few slides from now. But during COVID, air quality, air exchange rates, and all that became a much bigger topic of conversation, and I think we need to take a little bit of credit. The board at the time took our recommendation from this team here not to jump into polar ionization and all the other things that were the must-haves at the time, and we took a slower approach with, let's find out what we have, what's working, what's not, where can we improve, what have we not been doing. So that conversation started back up in 2021, and we hired Ring and Do to perform a district-wide HVAC study. And what came of that is kind of what we knew, but you know, it's, I think, more impactful when you see it all together in one single document that, you know, the vast majority of our equipment is beyond its useful life. Now, I always hear the term useful life, and I think that's a great pitch for salespeople to use. So then we kind of narrowed it down and said, all right, I said, double that. That's the number we'll use. So our conversation that led to those projects being approved, that we'll talk about, 28% of our major HVAC equipment was 2 times its expected life. So I thought that was a clear message, at least for the ESSER conversation and the dollar. So, you know, we have a ways to go. We've made huge strides. You know, we've talked internally that we never thought we'd be where we are, when you include everything we're planning to do in the summer ahead. So we went through the study. We used the ring and do information, but Joe Hines is our lead for HVAC, and Kyle, and we sat down and we brought Kurt in because of his buildings and grounds and facility knowledge, and said, all right, what are our priorities? And we tried to meld it into one document, and that was what was presented. So then in November of '22, the board authorized us to proceed with Phase 1 and 2A of HVAC work using ESSER funds mainly, or all ESSER, or ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, it was a combination. And then we got into trying to schedule it, and lead times has made it a 2-summer project rather than a single one. So the goals, and then I'll turn it over to the team to walk you through what we're doing, was to improve indoor air quality, ventilation, filtration, temperature control, cooling. Some of you might have been on the board. We had referendum dollars that we had saved that we used to do duct work, go to MERV 13 filtration where we could. But keep in mind, our buildings have different heating systems. Not all of them have moving air that moves through filters, so that's not everywhere, but it's everywhere we could do that. And then improve reliability and access to replacement parts, because some of our equipment was simply aging out. We're transitioning some June air furnace equipment to hot air boilers, and with boilers you're doubling the anticipated life. We're putting in more controls, DDC. We put in a little definition so the acronym doesn't lose us, where we think we lose, on average, from studies that have been done, about 15% of energy use with improved controls. And then just overall the energy efficiencies that we hope to realize, and you do, because you go from a boiler that fills a room to a boiler that looks like a refrigerator. And I've never hired an engineer to tell me we're saving money, you just kind of know. So we're going to walk you through all the projects that are underway now or queued to go into work. So we'll start with Bethesda, and we'll try to keep it high level, but we want all these schools to know what's going on and their parents to know what's going on in their buildings as well. So bear with us as we kind of go through all this.
Yeah, as we prioritized, starting with that ring and do report, as we prioritized, we used their report, we used the operational experience that Joe and his team had on the HVAC side. And then as we went into and looked at buildings, it's like, okay, Bethesda's a great example where we looked at that building and there was 2 units that was a priority of those, but looking at the rest of the other 5 units, they were about the same age. So it's like, okay, if we're going to go in that building, let's get in there and do all of them, so we don't need to go back there, right? So that was some of our thought process as we prioritized and reprioritized to make sure that we're getting the best bang for the buck, make sure we're doing the best for the district, and being the most efficient. It's more efficient to go in the building once rather than this year and then 2 years later. So we'll just walk through the projects with the long lead times, and I feel like they're getting better from when we first talked about this and when this was approved last December. Some of these projects, we were 70, 80 weeks out, which is just crazy to think about. 70 to 80 weeks, that's over a year out on some of those pieces. So that was the idea of doing a two summer project, 2023 and 2024. So as we walk through these individual schools, we'll identify what's been done already and what's coming up in next year in the planning. So I'll kind of go high level and let Joe add any more detail from the HVAC side. So Bethesda, 7 air handler units, replaced, refurbished those units, so new components inside those units, updated the DDC control. So that's a common theme you're going to see across all these, and it goes back to energy efficiency, which is one of the goals, and it goes back, I'd say probably the bigger driver of that is the indoor air quality, the comfort, right? When you have a digital control versus the old style pneumatic control, having that ability to not only set something, but know that what you set is actually doing what it's supposed to do. It's very, in these older systems, you can say turn on or open the damper up to allow outside air come in. And without that feedback from the DDC control, you don't know if the damper actually opened up, right? So that's just an example of how that DDC helps on the energy side and also helps on the indoor air quality side. Bethesda, this summer will be 100% complete. Nothing will be, need to be done. Next year will be complete with those 7 units and that DDC upgrade.
One other thing that was unique, if I remember right, Bethesda, the other reason we decided to do all of them was the location of those units up high. We almost had to open up a wall, or I can't remember.
It would have been a roof. One concept we were looking at was potentially replacing the unit, but you'd have to actually lift it out of the roof.
So it was
to do that.
unique site things like that, that sometimes we refurbish something versus new, because I don't know if the new equipment would have fit in the space either, so it was really a lot of analysis to make sure it would all come together.
So Hawthorne, we had air handler 1, supply fan 1, 2, 3, 4 refurbished, and the June air replacement. So back to the goals again, the June air, you're going to see that term up there a lot. That's the old style furnace. We can't get parts for that anymore. In fact, when you come across it, it's either you have to go to a secondary market or have somebody make that part, right, for it. So that was a number of these buildings. You're going to see June air furnace replacement. Basically, it's taking that old style, 80% efficient furnace and replacing it with a boiler. And then that boiler, rather than the 20-year life expectancy, you get 40-year life expectancy, right? So with that, you got energy savings. We captured cooling. So again, back to the goal of indoor air comfort, indoor air quality. Cooling falls under that category as well. Not all our buildings are cooled. Many buildings have partial areas, so where feasible, as we went through this, as Darren said, each building's a little bit different. We would capture cooling where it was feasible, and so Hawthorne's one where we're doing more cooling. Joe, would you say at Hawthorne, once these projects are done, what percentage would Hawthorne have for
We're
cooling?
gonna be right up around that 98% roughly.
Which is great. So 98% when these projects are done at Hawthorne will be cooled, and then the control upgrade as well. As part of the cooling, that additional electric requirement required that electric service upgrade. So where I said the 70 to 80 weeks, when we were talking about last December, that's one that we got all the equipment's been received except for our electrical switchgear. That work's gonna get done this next summer, 2024, to actually put that equipment in at Hawthorne, and so in 2024 we'll have that complete. Hillcrest air handler 1 refurbished. Same thing with the June air, update the hot water coils and cooling coils. Some energy efficiency we pick up there. That one we actually replaced the entire boiler system over there as well. So again, a little over $3,000 a year for those savings. We'll complete Hillcrest 100% this summer. Lowell, the air handler 1 and 2 is being refurbished. The June air, so there you see the June air again, that's getting eliminated, replaced with the boilers. We're adding, so air handler 1 had cooling, we're updating the cooling in there to be with the current type of refrigerant. And then air handler 2 and supply fan 3 did not, so that's the other half of the building, would you say?
Easily, yeah.
We'll get additional cooling. So that piece won't be online for the start of this school year. That is another electrical service upgrade dependent on, But what they were able to do is they were able to get that other half of the school a little bit of relief by sharing from air handler one. So that'll get a little bit, but the full won't be until next summer.
I'd like to add too that the gymnasium is not cooled and we had switched that over to its own unit, a rooftop unit.
Yeah.
That also will be waiting on an electrical system upgrade to finalize that project next summer.
So there we think we're about 70% complete with the units. They've done a lot of the updates. It's just we can't go completely live until that electrical service comes in. Prairie's another one that we had a June air furnace, so that's getting replaced with the boiler. Cooling is being added, controls being changed from pneumatics to DDC. That requires electrical service upgrade as well. So same thing. Equipment's been received. Final electric service and work on the roof and the units will be next summer. North High School, that building of the three high schools was the furthest behind as far as controls. The old style controls, there's quite a bit left in North, so the big portion of North was updating the older VAV boxes, variable air volume. Those are the units that control how much heat or cooling happens in the individual classrooms throughout the school. So those are being replaced, a couple air handlers units being replaced. So that work, that design is complete, that work is planned for 2024 as well. So one thing on the projects, when you look at where the district has been on the HVAC side, and it's Darren mentioned it, and you guys have made a ton of progress on HVAC since 2018, starting with our referendum projects. Right, we had Butler, Horning, Les Paul, and South were major focuses of the referendum. So if we look at the dollars that was invested as part of the referendum that was specific to HVAC, and then Hawthorne, Hillcrest, Whittier, which was also referendum, and then the first summer of safety and security work, in total, we have about 10.67 million worth of HVAC investments. So that was kind of the kickstart to the HVAC improvements. And then the phase one portion, so phase one and phase 2A, we ran those in parallel. That was this summer and next summer. We broke them out because of that phasing piece of it, but ran them in parallel because of the long lead times. So Bethesda, Hillcrest, Lowell, and North that we just talked through, about 5.88 million. And then phase 2A, which was Hawthorne and Prairie, that's about 4.4 million. So this next slide puts it all together as far as how much HVAC investment has been made between 2018 and 2024, between referendum funded, and then the ESSER, which was a phase 1 and 2A of the 10.3. And then we can't forget about this Blair building. As part of this project, there was about $780,000 of HVAC improvements in this building as well. So $21.8 million since 2018 has been invested. So a significant investment. When you think back to the Ring and Do report, where it was 28% of the district's equipment was more than 2 times the average life expectancy of equipment, this starts making a good dent in that, right? It's by no means saying that your HVAC after this you're all up to date, but you're making really good progress on the amount of HVAC work that's been done through the last number of years.
And then
Wait.
the second bullet, there's no number, we can guesstimate. But we also made huge strides by not selling Randall and Lindholm, because I would say we probably had $3, $4, $5 million of HVAC work easily to be done in those 2 buildings too, which cost avoidance is a good thing too. So I'll close out really quick. This is our last slide. So we are actually working on using Ring and Do, again, kind of the same process we just talked about with us guys who are here. and the district and Kurt and Ringendu, and kind of coming up with what that next phase might look like. Some of that will probably include some work at North, additional work at North. We're looking at the strategy we have going into North, South, and some work at West. I'm guessing 24, 25 would be the range of that work, if you decide to have us go ahead with that. But yeah, we're here to answer any questions you might have.
Mrs. White?
I was just wondering, what is the percentage of our buildings that don't have air conditioning after these improvements? What would you guess is the amount, the number of buildings per se that would not have that access?
I'll give a quick answer, and then it's always tricky because very few of our buildings are completely air conditioned. If you go to South, it's hit and miss throughout, so it's not as simple as which buildings have it. And we always say there's no such thing as all, because every building's so unique. But Joe,
Well
go.
said. Yes, I'd say after this project, we'd probably have another 40% or more of the buildings in the district that touch base in, and the fully air-conditioned spaces and update. But it'd be, my own opinion, probably be a little more manageable after we execute this initial step of ESSER funding projects.
Mrs. White?
The other comment I was going to make is the impressive savings with the energy, savings that you're identifying. I think that's a really positive, change in the process.
Yes, we've had some antiquated systems out there that we're truly in need of replacement, and we'll see a significant impact in energy savings, in my opinion, so.
Thank you. I know that I had asked for a nice update on this, and you guys did a really great job. I think it was interesting to take a look at, even Joe, when you and I would talk, and see pictures of some of the archaic dinosaurs that were in some of our buildings, and to really take the time and be able to use ESSER funding to make such significant improvements is really, really nice. It benefits all of our students, and I know this has been a topic that many have been concerned about for a long time, as the district has managed, the operational funding pieces. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Piasek?
One more thing. Thank you for the level of detail on this. I just wanted to add that these aren't the fun projects, right? When you look at over 5 years, 6 years, $22 million of investment, not to mention the time and effort that's gone into evaluating what the needs are, prioritizing the needs, and coordinating all of that. So thank you to all of you for that. But these aren't the types of things that people want to spend the one-time money on. But I think to the administration, to the leadership team, and every board member who I think has supported this, that it just demonstrates that commitment to maintaining our facilities. I think we've got a KPI that points to a certain, specific amount that's really redirected toward maintenance and facility support, and we have a lot of buildings. We've been responsible in removing the ones that are costly and maybe not well occupied. But hopefully that creates some capacity down the road for us to do the things that people will feel. The kids aren't going to come back to school in September and say, oh, there's no new HVAC in the building. But we'll know. So, and the outcomes will, I'm not going to commit to anything, but I do appreciate just the commitment that everybody's had to doing this, because you look at those dollars and it's significant, just like anybody who owns a home, and we had, I think, gone well beyond some of the useful life for some of those. And ultimately, we're going to probably get hit with some emergency situations that we wouldn't have been financially prepared for. So, thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much. This was great.
Thank you for having us.
All right, our next discussion item is the monthly budget report.
So we're at the time of year where we're crossing over between 2 fiscal years, closing out last year and reopening this next year. Our auditors were on site a couple weeks ago for preliminary work. The scheduled final audit is the week of August 14th. So kind of this month, we are using our preliminary budget approval as our monthly update. We don't have a lot of revenues and expenditures in July.
Summer school. Pretty much.
Any questions? Okay. With that, then we can move on to the ESSER update.
So
I
as-
feel like this is we should have a recorded session for the ESSER one, where we're at.
We're making progress. The last couple months, we hadn't spent a lot of the ESSER two, but we have now received almost $3 million of the $7 million that was allocated. We have another $1.5 million that was approved by DPI. We're just waiting for those funds to come in. Another 1.5 was submitted to DPI that we're waiting for approval on. So we're getting pretty close to having all of that spent and then just waiting on the receiving of the funds.
Great. Any questions? Okay. That moves us into other business. Is there recommendations for future committee meetings? Okay. I do not believe we have a need to go into executive session tonight. So that will then conclude our meeting. Our next meeting is set for Monday, September 11th at 5:30 in the Blair Building. That's it. Have a good night. Thanks.
Thank you.
I was looking for a contract this afternoon.
Well, the purchase of the bus, once they got it.